living in a world where people care for one another, and the importance of feeling connected that are founded in the earliest years.
The state banquet was meant to show unity, dignity, and calm power. But in one silent second, everything changed. Catherine looked across the glittering table and saw it Diana's pearl ring resting on Camilla's hand. The room did not hear a shout. It heard something worse. A chair moved. A conversation died. And Catherine, pale but steady, halted the entire banquet before the crown could pretend nothing had happened. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine did not blink. She stared at the ring as if the past itself had entered the room and placed its hand beside Camilla's plate. A state banquet, the grand royal dinner held for important guests and used to show the strength of the monarchy, was supposed to be controlled from the first toast to the final farewell. Charles had arranged the evening to prove the family was steady after weeks of private tension. Yet one pearl ring shattered that message before the first course could settle. William saw the change in Catherine before anyone else understood it. The prince knew that look. It was not anger at first. It was pain held so tightly it almost looked like calm. Diana was not just a memory to him, and she was not just a name attached to jewels and old portraits. She was his mother. She was the wound the palace could never fully cover. So when Catherine noticed the ring, he understood why her hand slowly left the table. Camilla felt the room shift around her. The queen consort lowered her hand, but the movement betrayed her more than silence could protect her. She knew Catherine had seen it. She knew William had seen Catherine see it. And in that terrible pause, the pearl ring stopped being an accessory. It became a question. Why was Diana's ring on Camilla's hand? Who had approved it? And why had no one warned the family before it appeared in front of every watching eye? Charles tried to steady the moment, but the king's authority no longer filled the space. He lifted his glass slightly, as if the rhythm of royal ceremony could pull everyone back into order. It failed. Catherine's chair moved just enough to cut through the room. The sound was small, but its meaning was enormous. She did not create a scene. She created a boundary. She made the banquet stop. Catherine spoke with a controlled voice, but every person near her understood the force behind it. She asked why Diana's pearl ring was being worn that night. Not later, not privately. There, in the middle of the royal table. William stayed beside her, silent but unmistakably protective, while Camilla sat frozen under the weight of the question. The answer did not come quickly, and that delay became its own confession. And once that question entered the room, the evening stopped being about jewelry and became a battle over memory, loyalty, and who had the right to touch Diana's legacy. At the center of the crisis were four people trapped by one ring. Catherine, wounded but controlled. William, silent but burning. Camilla, exposed in a room that suddenly felt hostile. And Charles, torn between the wife beside him and the daughter-in-law who now carried Diana's emotional inheritance. No crown, title, or protocol could soften what happened next. This was not a public argument. It was a family wound reopening under royal lights. Catherine felt the weight before anyone dared to name it. Her place in the family was no longer only about duty, smiles, or formal appearances. She had become the quiet bridge between Diana's memory and the future William was expected to lead. The queen consort, meaning the wife of the reigning king who shares royal status but does not rule in her own right, carried her own authority beside Charles. But Diana's jewelry was different. It held grief. It held love. It held a history the public still guarded fiercely. William kept his eyes on Catherine because he understood the pain behind her silence. The prince had spent years learning how to hide old wounds under royal discipline. But this moment cut too close. Defending her meant more than supporting his wife. It meant standing between his mother's memory and a palace system that often expected emotions to disappear behind ceremony. Camilla felt the pressure moving toward her from every side. She had worn the ring as if it could sit quietly on her hand, but now it looked like a claim. The queen consort tried to keep her face composed, yet her fingers tightened. She knew Catherine's silence had become louder than an accusation. Every glance at the table was now falling toward that pearl ring. Charles understood the danger faster than he showed it. The king knew this was not about manners. It was not about who wore what at a formal dinner. It was about whether Diana's memory had been handled with care or whether it had been used without permission. He looked from Catherine to William, then toward Camilla, and the pause between them said what no official statement ever could. Catherine did not raise her voice, and that made the moment more powerful. She rarely challenged royal order in public, and everyone knew it. So when she refused to let the banquet continue as if nothing had happened, the room understood that something sacred had been crossed. William stayed close, calm on the outside, but the future king's silence carried warning. Camilla lowered her hand again, but the damage had already found her. Charles tried to protect the room from collapse, yet even he could feel the truth pressing forward. The ring had opened a buried story, one the palace had tried to keep far away from that table. But the ring had not appeared from nowhere, and the road to that moment began long before Camilla ever entered the banquet hall. The banquet did not explode because of a single glance. It exploded because of something that had happened weeks earlier behind closed doors. A private memorial gathering for Diana had ended with Catherine making one quiet request: keep certain pieces untouched until William could decide their future. Charles heard her. William understood her. But Camilla remembered it differently. And from that moment, the pearl ring became more than an heirloom. It became a test. Catherine had spoken softly that day, but her words stayed in the room long after the gathering ended. The private memorial ceremony, meaning a small family event held to honor Diana away from the public, had taken place inside Kensington Palace, with only close relatives present. It mattered because Diana's memory was not distant history for William. It still lived in his choices, his silence, and the way he protected the people closest to him. William supported Catherine before anyone asked him to. The prince knew the pearl ring carried more than beauty. It carried childhood grief, unfinished conversations, and the ache of a mother lost too soon. He did not want Diana's most personal jewels treated like normal palace pieces, chosen for clothing, rank, or evening display. He wanted care. He wanted respect. Above all, he wanted time. Camilla heard the request differently. The queen consort sat through the memorial with a calm face, but the words cut deeper than she admitted. She felt Catherine had drawn a quiet circle around Diana's legacy and left her standing outside it. To Camilla, that boundary felt less like protection and more like judgment. She had spent years beside Charles, yet Diana's shadow still had the power to decide what she could touch. Charles understood both women, and that was the danger. The king heard Catherine's plea and saw William's pain, but he also felt Camilla's pride stiffen beside him. Catherine then said the line everyone would remember later. Some pieces still belong to her story, before they belong to ours. She said it gently, not as an attack, but as a plea. Charles nodded. William lowered his eyes. Camilla said nothing. That silence became the crack in the palace wall. Charles never turned Catherine's request into a written instruction. The king never placed it into a clear family rule. He believed everyone understood the emotion behind it. But emotion without order can be ignored. Palace permission, meaning the approval needed before royal items are used in public, was left dangerously unclear. Camilla found room inside that uncertainty. She did not need to break a written command, because no written command existed. Catherine later believed a private promise had been broken, while the queen consort believed no final rule had stopped her. Between those two beliefs, the pearl ring waited. So when Catherine saw the pearl ring at the banquet, she was not seeing a jewel for the first time. She was seeing a warning ignored. No one expected Catherine to speak. That was why the room felt colder when she did. Her voice was low, controlled, and devastating. She did not accuse Camilla loudly. She did not embarrass Charles with anger. She simply asked why Diana's pearl ring was being worn that night, at that table, without William being told. The question landed with the force of a verdict, and Camilla had nowhere to hide. Catherine kept her hands folded, but her stillness was not weakness. It was control. Banquet protocol, meaning the expected rules of silence, order, and formal behavior during a royal dinner, depended on everyone pretending the evening was smooth. Catherine broke that rhythm without raising her voice. That mattered because royal power often survives through quiet agreement, and she had just refused to agree. Charles tried to pull the room back into shape. The king asked for the next toast to continue, hoping ceremony would cover the crack before it spread. But no one moved quickly enough. The guests waited for Catherine, not for him, and that single delay wounded his authority. He had spent the evening trying to show control, yet the future of the family now sat in William's silence and Catherine's calm face. Camilla looked directly at Catherine and forced herself to answer. The queen consort called the ring a tribute, a gesture of respect, a way to honor Diana's place in the family. But Catherine heard something colder than respect. She heard possession dressed as kindness. She heard the memory of a woman turned into a palace explanation, and the pain behind that thought almost broke through her voice. William stayed beside Catherine, and his restraint became its own warning. The prince knew this was the moment where anger could destroy the message, so he chose precision instead. He asked Camilla whether she remembered the Kensington memorial request. The question was quiet, but it cut deeper than any accusation. Camilla paused, only for a moment, but in that pause, the room understood everything. Catherine then said the words that changed the night completely. Tribute requires care. The sentence was simple. It did not need drama. It carried grief, dignity, and judgment all at once. Charles set down his glass before taking the toast, and the sound told everyone the king finally understood the scale of what had happened. This was no longer about one ring. This was about who had the right to decide how Diana's memory would be used. Camilla's face tightened. She wanted to defend herself, but every defense made the ring look heavier on her hand. Catherine did not look away. William did not soften. Charles felt the argument move beyond emotion and into power. Because if his wife could be challenged at his table, then his family was no longer accepting old rules without question. And once authority entered the conflict, the banquet became a stage for the deeper power struggle no one wanted to name. Behind every royal symbol is a chain of permission. Someone opens the vault. Someone approves the selection. Someone decides what history is allowed to be worn. That night, Charles discovered the most dangerous truth of all. Nobody wanted to admit who had cleared the ring. Catherine wanted accountability. William wanted respect. Camilla wanted legitimacy. And the king, suddenly isolated, realized control had slipped from his hand before the first course ended. Charles asked for the approval card, and the room around him seemed to tighten. The palace jewelry office, the small royal department responsible for preparing jewels for formal appearances, had cleared Camilla's banquet pieces through normal channels. That mattered, because normal channels were never supposed to touch Diana's most personal items without care. They were not ordinary ornaments. They carried memory, grief, and public devotion. A senior courtier placed the card near Charles, and the king's expression changed before he could hide it. The name on the approval trail reached too close to his own authority. He had trusted tradition. He had trusted staff discretion. He had believed no one would challenge a selection once the banquet had begun. But Catherine had challenged it, and now every quiet assumption inside the palace was falling apart. Catherine felt the betrayal in a colder way. The ring had not simply appeared by mistake. It had passed through hands, through boxes, through approval, through silence. Her earlier request had been treated like a feeling instead of a boundary. William understood why that hurt her so deeply. The prince had heard that request at Kensington, and he knew Catherine had spoken not for power, but for protection. Camilla watched Charles read the card, and her confidence thinned. The queen consort had wanted the ring to say she belonged fully inside the royal story. Instead, it made her look like she had stepped into a place still guarded by Diana's memory. She wanted legitimacy, but legitimacy cannot be forced from a jewel that carries another woman's pain. Charles refused to blame Camilla in front of everyone. The king would not offer his wife as a sacrifice to calm the table. But he also refused to dismiss Catherine, because doing that would wound William and deepen the crisis. That was the trap. If he defended Camilla too strongly, he looked careless with Diana's legacy. If he sided with Catherine too clearly, he humiliated the queen consort beside him. The approval trail revealed the hardest truth. Camilla had not worn the ring by accident. The piece had been selected, cleared, and placed among the evening's jewels. No one had stopped it. No one had asked William. No one had honored Catherine's warning. Charles knew a private decision was now unavoidable. The ring could not remain on Camilla's hand, not after the question, not after the hesitation, not after the card. The monarchy could survive many things, but it could not survive looking cruel toward Diana's memory while her son sat at the same table. But removing the ring would not remove the humiliation, and the first person to feel that new reality was Camilla herself. The banquet resumed, but only in appearance. The music returned. The plates moved. The smiles were placed back on faces like fragile masks. Yet Camilla was no longer part of the evening in the same way. When she stepped into a private side room and removed the pearl ring, the silence around her became unbearable. For the first time that night, she was not queen consort. She was a woman staring at the symbol that had exposed her. Camilla left the table with two aides walking close enough to protect her, but not close enough to comfort her. Palace aides, meaning the trained staff who guide royal movement and protect formal order, used soft words to make the exit sound normal. A short pause, a private adjustment, a matter of protocol, but everyone who mattered knew the truth. She had been moved away because the ring could no longer remain on her hand. Catherine stayed in the banquet hall beside William, and her silence held its ground. She did not look victorious. She looked wounded. The princess had stopped the evening because Diana's memory mattered, not because she wanted a public victory over Camilla. William understood that difference, and the prince remained close to her, careful and steady, because the room was still watching every breath they took. Camilla stood alone and removed the ring slowly. The queen consort placed it on a velvet tray, and her hands tightened as the pearl left her finger. That small act carried more humiliation than any speech could have created. She had entered the banquet wearing a symbol of royal belonging. She now faced the truth that the same symbol had made her look like an intruder inside Diana's story. Charles entered after her, and the king spoke gently. That gentleness should have softened the moment, but Camilla heard distance inside it. She wanted him to defend her without hesitation. She wanted him to say the room had overreacted. Instead, he said the ring would not be worn again until William and Catherine were consulted. The decision was quiet, but it was final. Camilla stared at him, and her pride cracked before her voice did. She asked whether he was choosing Diana's memory over his wife. Charles did not answer quickly enough. That delay hurt more than any direct rejection. The monarch had tried to protect everyone, but in trying to protect everyone, he had left her standing alone with the one answer she feared most. Catherine remained outside that room, but her objection had already changed the night. William knew it too. The future king saw that grief had turned into a boundary, and a boundary had turned into power. Camilla could remove the ring, but she could not remove what the moment had revealed. Because outside the side room, the future king and queen were no longer asking what had gone wrong. They were deciding what must never happen again. Later that night, away from guests, aides, and royal performance, William and Catherine stood together, with no one between them. There was no speech prepared, no palace statement, no polished answer for the world. There was only the weight of Diana's name, the ring that had crossed a line, and the question of what kind of monarchy they would inherit. Catherine did not ask William to fight. She asked him to remember. Catherine spoke first, and her voice carried the exhaustion she had hidden all evening. The private room gave them the one thing the banquet had taken away: honesty. Emotional stewardship, meaning the careful protection of family memories and symbols, mattered more than public relations now. The palace wanted a controlled explanation by morning, but William and Catherine knew a clean statement could not heal a careless wound. William listened without interrupting. The prince had spent years learning how to survive his grief without letting it rule him, but Catherine's words reached the part of him that never stopped being Diana's son. She admitted that seeing the ring on Camilla's hand felt like watching his mother's memory being moved without consent. Not stolen, not destroyed, moved. And somehow that made it hurt more. Catherine did not speak with anger. She spoke with quiet pain, the kind that asks for care instead of revenge. The princess told William that Diana's personal pieces could no longer be treated like general palace property, chosen by staff, cleared by cards, and worn without the family understanding what message it would send. That mattered because symbols do not only decorate royalty, they tell the public what the family values. William reached for Catherine's hand, and the silence between them changed. The future king knew she was right. He did not want to punish Camilla for the sake of humiliation, and he did not want to turn Diana's memory into a weapon. But he also knew that restraint could not mean surrender. A boundary had to exist, or the same pain would return under another name, another jewel, another formal night. Catherine watched him make the choice before he said it. William would request a new family protocol for Diana's personal jewels. A family protocol means a clear, private rule that decides who must be consulted before sensitive items are used in public. This one would require direct consultation with him and Catherine before any piece closely tied to his mother appeared at a royal event. William chose power without cruelty. Catherine chose dignity without silence. Together, they turned the night away from revenge and toward protection. That decision mattered because it showed the future monarchy would not be built only on crowns, ceremonies, and obedience. It would also be built on memory, consent, and emotional truth. By morning, their private boundary would no longer stay private. The palace could try to soften the story, but the meaning had already escaped. The ring had forced a decision, and William and Catherine had made it together. And when the doors of the palace opened the next day, the public did not see a small etiquette dispute. They saw Diana's memory standing between past and future. By sunrise, the banquet had escaped the palace walls. Not as a rumor, not as a whisper, as an image. Camilla's hand, the pearl ring, Catherine's frozen expression, and William's protective silence became the story the monarchy could not soften. Britain woke to a symbol, and symbols are dangerous because they need no explanation. One ring had turned a private royal wound into a national judgment. Catherine became the face of quiet pain before the palace could shape the message. The official palace response, meaning the careful public statement used to control royal stories, tried to frame the moment as a private misunderstanding. But the language felt small beside what people believed they had seen. The ring mattered because Diana's memory still lived strongly in public emotion, and Catherine's reaction made that emotion feel personal again. William stood at the center of the story without saying a word. Broadcasters described the crisis as more than a family disagreement. They called it a clash between royal authority and Diana's lasting place in the nation's heart. The prince was shown as a son protecting the emotional borders around his mother, and Catherine was described as dignified but wounded. Together, they looked less like rebels and more like guardians. Camilla faced a colder morning than she expected. The queen consort had entered the banquet with status, but the public conversation stripped that status down to one question: should she have worn the ring at all? Even voices that usually defended her admitted the piece carried too much history to appear casually. The pearl had not looked like tribute anymore. It looked like a mistake, dressed in royal confidence. A London newspaper made the moment impossible to escape. Its front page carried a close image of the pearl ring beside the headline, "The Jewel That Silenced the Banquet." That single line turned the private confrontation into a national verdict. People did not need a long explanation. They saw the ring. They remembered Diana. They understood why Catherine had stopped the room. Outside Kensington Palace, the public feeling became quiet, but unmistakable. A small crowd gathered with white flowers, not shouting, not pushing, not demanding drama. Their silence made the message stronger. Kensington mattered because it was long connected to Diana's public life, and those flowers turned the argument into something deeper than palace politics. They made it about memory, respect, and grief that had never fully faded. Charles understood by midday that careful words would not be enough. The king could not dismiss Catherine without wounding William, and he could not defend Camilla without looking careless toward Diana's legacy. The monarchy had only one path left. It had to admit the emotional truth, and in the final hours of the crisis, the family learned that the crown survives not by owning every symbol, but by knowing which ones must be protected. In the end, the banquet was not remembered for its guests, its speeches, or its polished royal ceremony. It was remembered for the moment Catherine stopped the room and made everyone look at what they had tried to pass over. Diana's pearl ring became the line between possession and respect. Camilla lost the evening. Charles lost the illusion of control. William and Catherine gained something far more lasting: moral authority. Catherine did not celebrate what followed. She carried it quietly, because victory inside a wounded family never feels clean. The palace concluded that Diana's most personal jewels would now be handled under a stricter family consultation process, meaning William and Catherine would be directly asked before any deeply sensitive piece appeared in public again. That mattered because the monarchy could not keep asking people to respect its symbols while treating Diana's memory like something anyone could borrow for an evening. William felt the decision settle inside him with both relief and pain. The prince had protected his mother's legacy, but doing so had forced him to face Charles in a way no son ever wants to face his father. He knew the king had not acted with cruelty, yet carelessness had caused real hurt. That was the wound of the night, not evil, not revenge, something quieter, a failure to understand what certain memories still cost. Camilla returned the ring without ceremony. The queen consort did not make a speech, did not demand sympathy, and did not try to turn the moment back in her favor. She placed the pearl ring back into royal custody, and that simple act said what no official statement could say. The boundary had been crossed. The boundary had been seen, and now the boundary had to be respected. Charles accepted the decision because he finally understood the danger of ignoring emotional history. The king knew monarchy is not held together only by crowns, banquets, titles, and rules. It is held together by trust. If people believe the crown is careless with pain, then even its brightest jewels begin to look cold. He had tried to protect Camilla from humiliation, but he also had to protect William from a deeper betrayal. Catherine met Charles privately, before the night fully ended. The king told her the mistake would not happen again, and his voice carried no performance this time. She looked at him carefully, searching for the difference between apology and control. For the first time that night, she believed him. Not because everything was healed, but because he finally sounded like a man who understood the damage. William stayed close to Catherine after that conversation. The future king knew something had changed between them and the old palace order. They had not shouted. They had not broken the family apart. They had drawn a line and made the crown step back from it. That was their power. Not noise, not revenge, discipline. Camilla lost more than an argument that night. She lost the comfort of believing status could soften every symbol. Charles lost the illusion that silence could manage every wound. Catherine gained the authority of someone who had protected love without turning it into cruelty. William gained the peace of knowing Diana's memory would no longer be moved without him. There is no unfinished mystery here. Catherine halted the banquet, because Diana's legacy had been handled without enough care, and by the end, the crown understood the lesson clearly. Some jewels are not worn for power, they are protected for love. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.